Oh boy, I finally did it. I'm a real YouTuber now. I forgot to make an intro for this video. And as you can see, Tahiti's engine is missing quite a few parts because I've been taking them off. Look at that. Just pulled right off. This harness is just totally screwed. Look at this. Rock hard. Yeah, so. It's fine until you touch it, apparently. That's what she said. Oh, there goes the knock sensor. I guess I'm putting the Camaros in. Okay, I just spilled a bunch of ook into the engine. That's just because it looks like we had some water intrusion. This is what eventually kills the knock sensors or gives you codes. It's when those seals, those plugs, give way and they let water in there. Yeah, we definitely had some water in there, but I had no codes for the knock sensors whatsoever, so they were barely hanging on. Seen a little wear on the tops of a few of these push rods. Look how shiny that one is. Compared to this one. It's got a, it almost has like a brushed finish to it. Same thing on the rockers. Here's the shiny one. And then here's that sus looking one. And there's a few that are like that. There's one from the other end. Same thing, it's just kind of, it's got like brushed wear on it. All right, so with the passenger cylinder off, for 250K, I am very happy with this. Yeah, we have some kind of loose muck on top of the pistons. We'll get all of those cleaned off before we put the new heads on. But as for like the cylinder walls, man, I mean, look at that. We still have a very nice amount of cross hatching on there. And even the head. Head looks fine. Not too much buildup for the mileage. Got my new, well, at this point, those spark plugs have like 25K on them. Still look great though. And yeah, the only kind of weird thing I ran into so far were those kind of just random push rods. Some of them had some more wear than others. And I think that just has to do with, first of all, it has 250,000 miles on it, but also the rockers, that's kind of the last place the oil's gonna hit. Cold starts, just, you know, over the years, they probably just see some more wear than the rest of the engine. As for the cylinders, the lifters, you know, there's no weird tick. She does have some piston slap. So when it is cold out, this engine does slap a little like they all do, but once it warms up after maybe like a minute, it goes away. But no drive valve train noise whatsoever. So yeah, everything so far I'm actually really happy with. Let's go ahead, pull the driver's side head off, and then we'll spin it over and we'll take the pan off and we'll get that cam out. All the same, Looks pretty good. No ridge or anything, but I mean, do modern engines even like get ridges? Absolutely nothing up there. Cylinders look great. Let's, yeah, before we flip it, let's actually get the lifters out of there. If you're lucky, sometimes they come out with the basket. Not today. Not today. I mean, here's just one of the lifters, but I'm assuming we're going to be looking at all the same. Perfectly fine. A little stuck. There we go. Ugh. Right into the oil pan. Okay. Well, that was a happy accident. Oh, there it is. Okay. Little pro tip for you. You don't have Ziplocs to store your bolts. Just use your gloves. I have decided to kind of give this thing a little bit of a cleanup, a little bit of a paint job before we put it back into heat. So my plan right now is to sort of get as much of this sealed up as I can. So I just finished cleaning the surface of the valley cover. I cleaned the surfaces of where the knock sensor seals sit and kind of vacuumed all that out. And we're gonna install the valley cover and put the cam in. Front and rear covers. I still got to pull the back cover off to change the rear main and change that gasket. But we're just going to kind of get this sealed up as much as I can and get the oil pan cleaned out, get that reinstalled. And then I think I'm just going to tape off the head surfaces. And then we're going to kind of descale this thing with an air like descaler, get as much of the rust and crap off as I can. Quick coat of black paint just to get all the loose stuff off, make it look a little nice. And yeah, then we'll be ready once we get the heads back to get them installed and get the thing back in the car. Now the heads are currently off at Tune Time Performance. They're getting a CNC port job. And then from there, they're going over to Head Games Motorworks where they're going to get milled and they're going to get a full rebuild with new valves. So I'm kind of going all out on the top end. As you can see from the bottom end, I'm not really touching anything. And yeah, I mean, just looking at this thing, surprisingly, I mean, it's not good, but even the cam sensor, not cam sensor, the cam bearings, at least this front one, it's not good, but this actually, this is probably like one of the better cam bearings I've seen taking one of these engines apart. I know the one that I pulled the cam out of in my last video that was in my Camaro. That one, this was just all copper. There was like no, I don't know what the top surface of the bearing would be called, but you could tell like there's just wear. A bunch of spots on this would just be copper and worn away. Would be smooth, but this still has pretty much all of its, with the exception of kind of up here, most of its kind of silvery appearance. Got some pits in it. We're just gonna ignore that. So I'm just going to come in here and put a little bit of grease because I don't have oil handy on these guys. So those valley cover seals, those knock sensor seals, kind of slide on without a hitch. I'm going to link all this stuff down below, but here's the part number that I'm using. Got this from Rock Auto. It does come with the 2 knock sensor seals. Okay, well, this gasket is supposed to be for this engine. However, what the hell is that? Oh, I had it upside down. That's freaking great. Normally I wouldn't care about torque and stuff like this, but I really don't want any more leaks, and those valve cover bolts go to 18 foot-pounds. But next I am going to be using my aftermarket knock sensors that came out of my Camaro's engine because I completely broke the ones that were in here. Now unfortunately I do not have a 3/8 22 or a 1/2 inch torque wrench that goes down to 15 foot-pounds. So the knock sensors, which is probably the thing you do want to torque, I'm just going to have to just snug them up, I guess. Let's go get that surface rust off the end of this cam. Tick Performance, there's the part number. And once again, this is a stage 2, 4.8 and 5.3 turbo cam. Now this cam isn't new, so technically you could just throw some motor oil on it and throw it in the engine, but I have some of this assembly lube I'm just going to use. Also because I do not have oil. There we go. Next up, we have our cam retainer plate. These also get torqued to something. It looks like 18 foot-pounds on that as well. I mean, all these bolts are the same, pretty much. Like, some are different lengths. I mean, they're like the same thread pitch. And something that's important with this, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the gasket on this plate is very important. So if you pull this apart, especially if it has a lot of miles on it, you definitely want to replace that as cheap insurance, because I don't have the old one here. But you'll notice on the one that you pull out, especially if it's a high mileage motor, that gasket gets pretty much completely flat and hardened. Actually, I got it right here. You can see that is just completely smushed down. There's nothing protruding out past that plate. Whereas the one I just put in with like 20K on it still looked brand new and had a little bit of a protrusion. So if you go and put this thing back, there is a possibility you're not going to have any oil pressure if you install the original one that looks like that. But next up, let's get the cam gear on and our timing chain. And this is a LS2 style timing chain, also being recycled from my Camaro's old motor. So yeah, I'm just going to spin this over so the dot on the lower cam gear, the lower timing gear, is straight up like that. Straight enough, a little bit more. That's pretty close. So straight up like that, and then we're going to line that up with the... Where to put the cam gear? Yeah, so that's just going to get lined up with the dot on the cam gear, just like that. And that's how we know everything's going to be in time. All right, and lastly, I'm just gonna rotate this thing over. And after about 4 rotations, we should be lined back up. Coming around. There we go. Cam perfectly aligned with the crank. Timing chain feels good. Timing chain feels, it's just about what it was on the stock one. You always have slack in these timing chains like this. So if you go and put a new one on here and you see it's slacky, don't be concerned. But as you can see, there's really hardly any movement in the actual cam itself. And this is pretty much the same amount of play I had when I pulled the original chain off. So this thing was definitely cared for because there really isn't much wear that I'm seeing in this. You know, why not? We'll give this a little bit of splooge as well. That'll work its way in once I rotate it over. So now once again, this oil pump is out of my Camaro's engine. It's a Melling OEM replacement. There's no like high pressure, nothing like that. But it does have a heck of a lot less miles than Tahiti's pump. And being this hasn't been ran in a while, I'm just gonna take some of this and just kind of stick some in there. Kind of prime it. This is just gonna slip right over. And I know somebody's gonna comment it, but apparently there's a procedure for setting these pumps up. I've personally never done it. Does that mean it doesn't need to be done? Hell no. However, I've always just kind of, you know, primed these things, thrown them on, and never, apparently you're supposed to pull this cover off and essentially shim the pump equally around the gear here. So it's essentially floating dead in the middle. Because of the slack in these bolts, you can have it cocked over to one side where there's essentially pressure on it and it's not dead center on the crank, and that could cause premature wear on the pump. What I've always done is just kind of loosely get the bolts just about all the way down to the point where they're tight, where the pump doesn't move. And then I kind of just give it a little bit of wiggle just to kind of hand center it so you feel like there's no, you could feel there's no pressure in one direction or another of the pump on the crank. And then I just torque them down to spec like that. And I'm not going to say I never had a problem because I really don't want to jinx this, but that's the way I do it. Not much side to side movement. That's for this up and down. I'm just going to kind of center it. I'll just torque it down right there. So before I put the timing cover on and like torque it down fully, I do need to get the oil pan installed. So first off, I'm just gonna clean up around the timing cover. Once again, something I probably should have did before putting the cam in, but you know what? I just really want to get this thing together. Kind of like, yeah, I'll worry about the cleaning later. All right, so here's our front timing cover kit. So it comes with the seal for the crank, the gasket itself, then it also comes with water pump gaskets, and I think that's the kit for the O-ring gasket, the pickup tube for the oil pump. And once again, just for the sake of not having to clean anything, I have my Camaro's 5.3 timing cover that isn't covered with a bunch of crap. I'm just gonna knock that seal out. We'll get that one installed. Yeah, it's easy. My valves are going for a ride of their lives over here. Oh yeah, that's all the way down. All right, they're all just about all the way down. Yeah, you can see we have some wiggle in that. So once I get the crank pulley on there, it should locate that right where we want it. And then we can put the oil pan on. So I decided before I pull the back cover and get the rear main and that gasket changed, I am just gonna pop the lifters in, and these are recycled LS7 lifters. Once again, for my Camaro's old 5.3. Also, if anybody's wondering, this does not appear to have Gen 4 rods in it. The Gen 4s are, they're beefier, and I believe the caps are a little more squared off. So this just has the regular old Gen 3s in it. All right. Come on. Okay, well. The metal part of the gasket's coming off, but the rubber, yeah. The rubber is just completely stood behind. You know, before I go any further, let's see if we could tap this dipstick out. Okay, wow, that was actually extremely easy. They don't usually go that easy. Yeah, this actually doesn't have a lot of rust on it at all. Usually they get a hell of a lot more rusted in there, and you can't pull them out, but you can see right where it just broke off. All right, so one thing I completely forgot about here after pulling the rear cover off is the little oil barbell. So essentially this is just a plug. It literally, if you pull it out, it looks like a barbell with I think it has 1 or 2 O-rings on it, and it just plugs into the back of the main oil gallery. Now, they make aftermarket ones. You could get aluminum. I use an aluminum one in my Camaro 6.0 with that rebuild, and I don't think it does anything. I mean, it's supposed to, if it fails, from what I read, it's just going to divert oil away from the filter, and you're gonna have unfiltered oil going to the engine. I don't see why it would fail. It's literally just a plug that sits in there. Even if the O-rings were all dried up, that thing is so freaking stuck in there. I can't see it actually having any pressure leak out past the back. So we're just gonna leave that alone. Power on, we'll get our rear cover installed with our new main seal. And then we gotta get the oil pan cleaned up, and we'll get that installed. If you look, we have like a little scratch on the crank surface here where the rear main rides. Right there. My nail totally grabs it. Now I don't know, it didn't seem like the rear main was leaking. And I'm relatively sure I replaced this when I did the transmission. one of the 10 times. However, I don't want to put the thing back together and have that essentially be an issue where it leaks. Yeah, I guess I'm going to leave it alone. There's not much. It's kind of deep. I don't want to like start sanding at it and essentially create like a little divot. All right, so I just went and whacked the rear main out. And what I'm actually going to do with this is, I'm going to do it I guess technically the correct way. Just because back here, I don't want no leaks. Like I said, I put this thing back together, and after I put a rear main in it when I did the transmission, and when I did it that time, I pulled the rear cover off completely. I put the rear main in, I knocked it out, I put the rear main in here, and then I slid the cover on with the rear main and tightened everything back down that way. I didn't loosen the back of the oil pan with the exception of taking these two bolts out. And I don't know if that was contributing to my leak or not. It didn't look like there was oil slinging. However, there was a little bit of a wet spot at the bottom here of the seal. So whether it's alignment or the that little nick on there, or just, I don't know, maybe the seal got messed up when I installed it last time. However, it does look fine. I want to make sure I completely eliminate rear cover alignment as an issue. So what I'm going to do now is get my gasket in here. I'm going to pop this in with no seal. And then, believe it or not, it actually friggin' fits, which I couldn't believe. Where the hell did I put it? I have this tool. It's specifically for this purpose. It lines the back cover up. So you slip that on there. And then what we're going to do is with that in there, we'll go ahead, put all these bolts in. We'll put the oil pan on, and then we'll torque everything down. So the front cover, the back cover, the rear cover, get everything torqued. Then we're going to pull this guy out. And then once I pull it off of the stand, that's when I'm going to pop the rear main in. And we know that the cover will be dead center on the crank, and that'll eliminate, knock on wood, if we did have any potential oil leaks, the cover alignment shouldn't be an issue. So the rear gasket kit I got also comes with the rear main, also from Rock Auto, part number, that's it, I guess? I'm gonna link this stuff down below regardless. But we'll set this guy aside. He's gonna be installed once the engine is off the stand. There we go. And that's it. So for now, I'm going to leave that in there. I'm going to get the oil pan cleaned up off camera, because that's just going to involve a lot of just degreasing and brake cleaner and just getting all this crap off of the pan. And then we'll come back, get it installed, and then everything will be sealed up enough. I'll probably just put some tape over the head surfaces, and we can start kind of cleaning the block off, and we'll get some black paint on it. So I got the oil pan all cleaned up, but before we install it, I want to get the crank pulley back on. That's going to make sure that the timing cover seal is perfectly centered on the pulley before we tighten this down. And I have this homemade tool I made. I just took an old bolt because I didn't have one in all thread that was the same thread as the motor. So I took an old crank bolt, cut it off, and then I just welded another bolt to it where I had big enough nuts to use to drive the thing down. And we're just going to screw this all the way in. And it's basically just a glorified longer crank bolt. It's going to allow us to tighten this thing in and press it on. All right, that's all the way down. Technically, you're supposed to replace these crank bolts. They're torque to yield. I have one for the Trans Am. I forgot to order one for the Tahoe, so I'm probably just going to use the Trans Am's new bolt and then I'll just order another one. But normally I'd just be like, screw it, and I reuse it. But the only reason I don't now is because I had a problem or an instance where it actually came loose on my Camaro. The pulley didn't fly off or anything, but the bolt totally came loose after torquing it down and reusing it. So, yeah, since that happened, I just tend to replace it now. I've been noticing, ever since I bought this thing, I put like shell Rotella in it once in a while, or I put usually at least like Mobil 1, just like a full synthetic all the time. I never put regular oil in this thing. And last time I had the pan off, like first of all, the heads looked really, really clean. And then when I took the pan off, when I did the diff and did the gasket for the oil pan gasket, I noticed there was a lot of just sludge in the bottom of the pan. And I cleaned all that out. And I don't know how long ago it was I did the pan. I'd say at least like 10,000 miles ago, maybe even more, since I cleaned the pan out and did the gasket. Well, after I pulled it off this time, I already went and got it all cleaned out. But I had pretty much the same amount of sludge in the bottom of the pan, just like gooey black oil. And I think what it is, because I do dry this thing, it's not like it sits or anything, just the synthetic oil, I think it's just kind of been working at cleaning off all this kind of lightly caked on stuff. So I think it kind of cleans it up with the oil, and then just the heavy stuff just kind of collects in the oil pan. So it seems like the synthetic oil is doing its job. But yeah, I'm not touching this. I'm not going through the effort of cleaning all this, because at the end of the day, the inside of the block kind of has the same finish on it. There's really no point of wasting time cleaning this. But with this thing tightened down, let me go find my pickup tube O-ring. Here's the part number for that. I ordered an individual one, but it looks like the timing cover kit came with one anyway. Here's the one that came off the engine. Here's the one I ordered separately, and then this is the little gasket kit that the timing cover comes with. And that's the exact same O-ring, so I got an extra one. So we're just gonna slip this guy onto our pickup tube, make sure it's, you know, nicely seated, not twisted or anything. I'm gonna go ahead, I'll take some lube I put in here. I'm just gonna lube this up. And this seems to be a problem that a lot of people have, where they'll put these engines back together and they won't have oil pressure, and then everybody says it's the pickup tube O-ring. Knock on wood, I've never had a problem with this O-ring. But then again, whenever I'm really pulling this pickup tube out, for the most part, the engine's always out of the car. It might be more difficult if you're trying to do this in the car. But just get that nice and lubed up. We'll line it up on our windage tray. And we're just gonna, just like that. Just, you know, slips in without a problem. Nothing's pinched. So I don't understand what the big fuss is with these O-rings, but I've never had a problem with pinching one. All right, so here's our oil pan gasket. Already prepped the block, got everything cleaned. Remember, both covers are loose right now, so I can kind of get everything aligned and then tighten everything down together. Just make sure this is facing the right way. Now, I ordered this I had this sitting in storage for my Camaro. I had a spare one, but I mean, they're pretty much the same. I see there's one like extra bolt hole here in the gasket that the truck block doesn't have. But I don't think that's gonna matter. Everything else, yeah, everything else lines up fine. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is get some RTV, and we just wanna apply it between the seams where the covers meet the block. Here's my pretty cleaned up pan. I'll just set this guy on top. Kind of slip the gasket around, make sure all our holes are lined up. We'll just get all these in threaded loosely. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. All right, well, luckily I caught myself before putting that oil pan on, because I forgot a crucial step for a turbo setup, and that is drilling the turbo drain. So as you saw, we put a turbo cam in the engine, and Tahiti's going to be getting turboed, so we're going to need a drain for the turbo. For the feed, I have decided I'm just going to use the block off for the optional oil cooler lines. So this is just going to have oil flowing through it, goes to the cooler, comes back in. If you don't have an oil cooler, it just has a plug on here. So you can kind of just drill the fitting that's already on here, drill and tap it for like a -4, just feed line, run that to your turbo, or they sell little adapter plates that are already drilled and tapped. You can just unscrew this. That's easily accessible with the pan in the car. However, with the pan off, we do need to drill through it for the drain. And once again, with the pan off, kind of makes the most sense to do it because all the shavings you can just kind of dump out instead of risking having some go into the engine. I don't think it's going to be a big deal anyway. The filter is just going to catch anything, or the pickup tube. But while we have it off, yeah, we're going to drill the oil drain. So I picked up this tap and drill bit set from Amazon. I'll link it down below. And we're going to drill and tap this for a pipe thread. And then I have this pipe thread to -10 male fitting. We're going to thread that with some thread sealant into the front of the pan. And yeah, I have a little cap. I'm just going to pop that on there. And then when it comes time to turbo her, just pull the cap off, run a hose up to the turbo, and that's one step already done. Now for the location of this, I really wanted to like put it somewhere on the passenger side of the pan. So when this is this is the front, so this is installed. Filters on the driver's side, this is the passenger side, rear of the vehicle right over here. I wanted to put it somewhere along here just because the turbo is going to be on the passenger side, but with the transmission cooler lines running along here and the AC compressor mounted kind of like back covering some of this, there's really no good place to put it. And I could put it all the way back there, but then that might give me a problem getting the starter down. So you really want to mount this in a place where there's going to be no at the highest point you can in the pan. So you're not going to have it just kind of sitting in oil, have a potential leak point, or have potential resistance for the oil to drain back into the pan. So I decided to put it right in the front here. I'm going to do it on the side where there isn't a pickup tube. So probably like right here. And then you can see there's plenty of room here. I could get like a 90 on there, clear the crank pulley, and run it up to the turbo when the time comes. Now, being this is a pipe thread tap, I'm not going to run the entire tap through. First of all, the metal is like super thin. But the other reason is the pipe thread, as the tap goes in, is going to make that hole larger and larger because that's how pipe thread seals. So I'm just going to run this down a little bit more just so I have enough thread in there that I can get enough engagement on the fitting. That feels pretty good there. I think that'll work. It's definitely sideways. It's I like to think of it as it's facing towards the turbo. And they could have just used like a regular bulkhead fitting, but you know, I just feel like this is going to seal a lot better even with it being sideways. All right, so check this out. Thanks to the wonders of pipe thread, I pulled the fitting out and I just tapped the hole a little bit deeper just to straighten the threads out. And yeah, the fitting's in there. It sits just about fully bottomed out. It's nice and tight, it's nice and straight, and we're ready to get this pan back on the motor. All right, so with all those loosely installed, now I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna kind of drive these front cover bolts in just so they're touching the cover, like they're all the way down by hand. And I really don't know what the exact procedure for this is, because obviously you have two floating covers and we have this pan that's sitting across both of them. You want to make sure you don't tighten one too much before the other, because if you tighten the cover first and say it's kind of sitting down more and it's tight against the block, and then you go to tighten the oil pan is going to try to pull down and potentially pull that up. You could potentially crack something, you could potentially have a leak, and that's kind of where it is as far as like the alignment goes and why it needs to, you know, just be torqued or installed in like a certain way just to not potentially break anything. Now I'm going to loosen these guys to kind of, actually no, they're already pretty loose. Yeah, so I know that's fully up and it is tight against the block, so close that gap up between the cover and the block. But still leave them loose enough where this cover can slide up a bit if it needs to. And it did, I did see it kind of slide up a bit. Tool still nice and loose in there. And you probably already guessed it, but 18 foot-pounds. And these two back ones here are 106 inch-pounds. All right, so with the panel tightened down, I'm gonna jump to the front now. I'll get the front cover tightened. I'll torque that crank bolt. And yeah, I'll kind of get in here off camera because these are a pain in the ass, and I'll just snug these guys down. And then we'll give them a torque once this thing's actually hanging on the crane and off the stand. Get a little more on that thing. There we go, that's nice and tight. All right, our finishing touch here. Just cap this guy for now. And yeah, unfortunately, the wiring harness isn't gonna be able to go back here because normally it sits right in here. It's in that plastic bulkhead. I'm just gonna have it run below the fitting. So I'll just have it go this way and maybe just zip tie it through these bolt holes. It's not really a big deal. And then when it comes time to actually turbo this thing and put a line on here, I could probably just get a low profile, one side female with like a nut, other side like this, just 90 degree, and that'll go. Which side's the turbo on? This side. So it'll just probably come out to like here, and then I could just run a straight hose on that and right up to the turbo. I need a big boy for this because this sucker gets torqued to 240 foot-pounds. Okay, I gotta figure out how to. That might be a little overkill. There we go. All right. There we are. All right, guys. So Tahiti's 250,000 motor. She's technically cam now. We got our turbo feed, our turbo drain installed, and the the bottom end is pretty much completely sealed up. Like I said, once I get it off the stand, I'm just gonna throw the rear main and torque that back cover. That'll be good to go. Next video, we are gonna finish this baby up. So we're gonna get our heads back on. We'll give the pistons a little shining. We'll clean the block up. Thought I was gonna get to it today, but this video ran a little long. So we'll take care of that in the next one. And yeah, after that, you figure we probably have like 2 more videos left in this little series of resealing and camming Tahiti. So the one after that, we'll probably have it in, started up and running, and then the final one will probably be just absolutely perfecting the tune and seeing how it runs. For the heads, as I said, they are a Tune Time Performance. They did get CNC'd and they are finished. So from there, they're actually gonna go over to Dave at Head Games Motorworks, and he's gonna do a full rebuild on them, valve job. He's gonna mill them down, and he's gonna do the full assembly for me. They're gonna get some new valves, and I should have them back soon, and they'll go on Tahiti's motor. Now, for the Trans Am, like I said, this is going to be done by the end of this year. Sometime in December, I'll have it finished up. Tahiti will be running and out of here, and then it's Trans Am time. Once the Trans Am is running, that's when Tahiti's going to be seeing our turbo.